listener. Let's dive into something I think we can all relate to. Small talk. I know. For some of us, just hearing those words makes us want to cringe.
Right.
Like, is there any way to make this less painful?
You know, it's funny you say that because I think the biggest misconception about small talk is that it's just this filler, like just avoiding those awkward silences.
Oh yeah, total.
But what our source material really emphasizes is that it can be so much more than that.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So we're not just defining it like, okay, light informal chit chat. We're giving folks actual tools to use it strategically.
Exactly. Because think about it. Whether you're at like a networking event or even just grabbing coffee with a colleague, those little interactions can actually plant seeds
Oh, interesting.
for deeper connections, which can lead to, well, who knows what.
That's true. I've definitely been in situations where like I was so focused on what I wanted to say
Yeah.
that I completely missed the opportunity to actually like connect with the person in front of me.
Yeah, that's relatable.
In fact, just last week I was talking to this potential client and I just launched straight into my pitch. Totally forgot to just, be a human first.
Oh, I've been there. And it's so easy to do, especially when you're feeling a little nervous or you're in a professional setting.
Right, exactly.
But the source material is really big on this idea of authenticity. It's not about being like this perfectly polished version of yourself. It's about approaching those small talk moments with genuine curiosity.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we shift gears? Like how do we move beyond those autopilot phrases? Hi, how are you? Busy day.
Oh, I hate those.
Yeah.
And our source material, thankfully, goes way beyond those.
Okay, good.
Because you're right. It's like, how do you find those right topics where
Yeah.
you're being engaging but not oversharing?
Especially, in a professional setting.
Right.
You don't want to be telling your boss about your, wild weekend.
Exactly. And the source really gets into this nuance of like finding those universal touch points, those things that almost anyone can relate to without feeling like you're, crossing a line.
Right, right. So what are some examples? Like what are some actual conversation starters that can spark something more engaging?
Okay, so let's take the weather, which can feel so generic.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, hot enough for yeah.
Right,
But
exactly.
instead of just stating the obvious, you could say something like, can you believe this heat? It feels like summer came early this year. Or if it's freezing, this is the coldest I've ever felt in April.
Right, because now you're inviting more than just a yes or no answer.
Exactly. It's like
It-
you're
it-
actually inviting the person to share their experience of the weather, too,
I see.
instead of just making a statement about it.
Okay, so it's all about how you frame it.
Mm-hmm.
What about travel? I feel like that one can be tricky.
Yeah, because have you traveled anywhere lately? Can feel like a bit of a dead end.
Right.
So what the source suggests is being a little more specific. Like maybe you notice someone has a Paris keychain, and you say, oh, I love Paris. Did you get to see the Eiffel Tower? Or, I've always wanted to visit France. What was your favorite thing about it?
Right. That's way more interesting than just like, have you traveled?
And it shows you're actually paying attention.
Yeah, I like that. It feels less generic for sure.
Definitely. And then another one that they mention is hobbies.
Okay, hobbies.
But again, it's not just about blurting out your entire list.
I like knitting and long walks on the beach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about using your hobbies to kind of subtly signal what you're interested in.
Oh, I see.
So let's say someone mentions they just ran a marathon.
All right.
Now, if you're into fitness, that's your chance to be like, wow, that's amazing. I've been thinking about training for a half marathon. Any tips?
Right.
Or if they're talking about their garden and you love plants, you can say, oh, my thumb isn't quite that green, but I'd love to hear what you're growing.
So it's like you're using your own interests as a way to find common ground.
Exactly. And that's where those deeper connections can start to form.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've got some topics, we're being authentic, we're framing things the right way. But how do you actually get the conversation going in the first place? Like, what are some good opening lines that go beyond just, hi, how are you?
Yeah, because hi, how are you can be, kind of a dead end.
Totally, yeah.
It's almost like an automatic response. People don't even think about it.
Right. Yeah.
So one thing the source suggests is commenting on your surroundings.
Oh.
Like, let's say you're at a conference and the speaker just finished. You could turn to the person next to you and say, wow, that was really thought-provoking. What did you think?
Right.
Or if you're at a party, you could say, this house is amazing. Have you ever been here before?
Oh, I like that.
It's a way to kind of break the ice, and it shows you're present and engaged in the moment.
Yeah, that's way better than just awkwardly standing there.
Definitely. And another tip they give is to use a mutual friend as a springboard. So if you both know John, you could say, "Hey, have you seen John lately? He was telling me about this crazy project he's working on."
Right, that's a good one.
It's an instant connection point.
Yeah, it's like you already have something in common.
Exactly. And it gives you a natural starting point for the conversation.
Okay, so we've got the opening line down. We've sparked some interest. Maybe we've even found some common ground. But how do we keep the conversation flowing?
That is the million-dollar question. And the source material has some surprisingly simple but powerful advice. Active listening.
Ah, active listening. Isn't that just like nodding and smiling?
Well, it's definitely part of it,
Okay.
making eye contact.
Mhm.
But it goes way deeper than that.
Okay, tell me more.
It's about actually absorbing what the other person is saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Right, right.
Like when someone's telling you about their trip to Italy, don't just be thinking about, oh, that time I went to Rome. Actually listen to what they're saying.
Uh-huh.
Ask questions.
Okay.
Show genuine interest.
So it's like you're fully present in that conversation,
Exactly.
not just mentally checking out.
Right, because people can tell
Yeah, they can.
when you're actually listening and when you're just waiting for your cue to jump in.
Yeah, totally. Any specific tips for active listening?
So the source actually gives some really practical advice,
Okay.
like using verbal cues to show you're engaged.
Okay.
Things like, oh, that's interesting, or tell me more about that.
Right, right.
Or even just simple things like, wow, or really.
Oh, yeah. I can see how that would make a difference.
It shows you're not just passively listening.
Right,
You're
yeah.
actively processing what you're saying.
Okay, that's good to know. So, active listening. Check. Anything else?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The source talks about the power of open-ended follow-up questions.
Open-ended. Okay.
So instead of just saying, oh, you like hiking, cool.
Yeah.
Try something like, where's your favorite place to go hiking around here?
Oh, I see. So you're taking their statement and turning it into an opportunity to learn more.
Exactly. You're inviting them to elaborate, to share their experiences and their passions.
And suddenly it's not just small talk anymore.
Right.
It's like the beginning of a real conversation.
It is. And that's the beauty of it.
Okay, this is making me rethink my whole approach to small talk.
I'm glad. Because it really can be so much more than just, filling the silence.
Yeah, it's like a secret weapon for building connections.
It is.
Wow. I'm excited to put some of these tips into practice.
Me too.
And to think, we're just getting started.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore.
But we'll have to save that for next time.
Definitely.
All right, so we've got like the foundation, picking topics, starting the conversation, asking those good follow-up questions.
Yeah.
But what about when things get, a little bumpy?
Oh, you mean when the conversation hits that awkward lull?
Exactly, like the energy just drops and you can practically hear the crickets chirping.
Oh, yeah, the conversational quicksand. We've all been there.
Right, and it's like, what do you do? Do you just keep rambling? Do you make a run for it?
Well, luckily our sources got us covered.
Okay, good.
They actually give some pretty clever strategies for navigating those choppy waters.
All right, I'm all ears.
So, first things first, pay attention to body language.
Oh, body language, right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can just tell when someone's like mentally checked out.
Exactly. And it's not always the super obvious stuff, like, someone looking at their watch or their phone.
Right, right.
The source actually points out some subtle cues that we might miss.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, did you know that the direction of someone's feet can actually reveal a lot about their engagement?
Wait, really? Feet?
Yeah, it sounds kind of strange, but
Okay.
if their feet are pointed towards you, it generally means they're interested and engaged in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if their feet are like subtly angled towards the exit,
Oh, no.
yeah, that might be a sign that they're ready to make a break for it.
Okay, so if you're picking up on those I'm out of here vibes,
Yeah.
how do you, like, gracefully wrap things up without it being super awkward?
Right. You don't want to just be like, oh, nice talking to you, gotta run.
Yeah, exactly.
So one technique the source mentions is summarizing the key points of the conversation. Like
Okay.
almost like you're like closing the chapter on that topic.
Oh, I see.
So you could say something like, well, it was so interesting hearing about your work in, sustainable agriculture. I'm going to have to check out that documentary you mentioned.
Right, it's like you're acknowledging what they said, but also signaling that, the conversation has reached a natural end.
Exactly.
I want to,
And it leaves things on a positive note, so.
right. It's not like you're just cutting them off.
Exactly.
Now, what if the flip side? Like, what if you actually want to keep the conversation going,
Mm-hmm.
but you feel like you've kind of exhausted the obvious topics?
Ah, yes, the dreaded running out of steam.
Right.
It happens to the best of us.
Like, okay, we've talked about the weather, work, weekend plans. What's next?
Well, this is where the art of bridging comes in.
Bridging?
Yeah, it's basically finding those smooth transitions between topics.
Okay.
So let's say you've been chatting about, I don't know, the new coffee shop that just opened downtown.
Uh-huh.
You could bridge to a conversation about favorite coffee drinks.
Oh, I
And
guess
then
so.
maybe from there to like local cafes they've been to.
Right, right.
Or even to like travel experiences in, coffee growing regions.
So it's like you're finding those little links, those connections
Exactly.
that keep the conversation flowing organically.
It's all about those natural segues.
Okay, bridging, got it.
Right.
But what about those times when, despite our best efforts, that awkward silence just creeps back in?
Oh, yeah, the conversational black hole. It can feel so uncomfortable.
Right, it's like all the oxygen gets sucked out of the room.
But even those moments can be salvaged.
Really?
Yeah, the source actually suggests acknowledging the silence with a little humor.
Oh, okay, like what?
You could say something like, well, this is awkward. It reminds me of that time I... And then launch into a quick, funny anecdote.
Right, so you're kind of breaking the tension.
Exactly.
And you're also, like, offering up a little bit of yourself.
Which can create a sense of connection and relatability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even if your joke doesn't land perfectly, just the act of acknowledging the awkwardness can often diffuse it.
Okay, so awkward silences, not the end of the world.
Nope, they can be an opportunity to get even more real.
I like that perspective.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something the source mentioned that I thought was really interesting. This idea of, like, reading between the lines in small talk.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's like Small Talk 2.0.
Right. It sounds almost like a superpower.
It kind of is.
So what exactly does it mean?
It's about paying attention to those unspoken messages, the things that people aren't necessarily saying out loud.
Oh, okay. So like reading body language,
Yes.
but even deeper than that.
Right. It's about understanding those social cues and those unspoken dynamics.
Especially in group settings, right?
Exactly.
Like noticing who's dominating the conversation.
Yeah.
Who seems a little hesitant to speak up.
Yeah, or who's like subtly shifting their attention.
It's like you're becoming a social detective.
You are. You're observing those nonverbal signals, and you're deciphering that unspoken language,
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be really valuable.
especially in professional settings.
Right, like at a networking event.
Hmm.
Or even just in a team meeting at work.
Absolutely. It allows you to navigate those situations with a lot more sensitivity.
And finesse.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Body language,
Yes.
bridging topics, awkward silences, even like the Jedi mind tricks of reading between the lines.
Right.
But let's be real, even with all these strategies, sometimes small talk can still feel a little, I don't know, inauthentic.
Like you're just going through the motions.
Exactly.
That's a really valid point. And something the source addresses head on. They're really big on this idea that authenticity is key.
Okay. Authenticity.
Like you can have all the right strategies, but if you're not genuinely interested in connecting with the other person,
Right.
it's going to show.
Yeah, it's like you can sense that, right?
Totally.
Like if someone's just, rattling off those generic questions.
It feels
Uh,
so forced.
Exactly. So how do we tap into that authenticity? Like how do we make sure it doesn't feel like we're just, performing?
Well, the source suggests thinking of small talk as like a treasure hunt.
Treasure hunt. Okay, I like that.
It's not about finding the perfect thing to say. It's about looking for those little nuggets of shared interest.
Oh, I see.
Those moments where you're like, oh, wow, me too.
Right, right.
It's about being curious and open to learning something new about the person you're talking to.
So instead of approaching it like, okay, gotta make small talk, it's more like, I wonder what I can discover about this person.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel more like an adventure.
And remember, even the most seemingly mundane topics can be a springboard for a deeper conversation.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of just asking, what do you do?
Hmm.
Which can feel kind of, surface level.
Right, yeah, it's like an interview question.
Exactly. Try asking something like, what's the most interesting part of your work?
Oh, that's good. Because now you're inviting them to share a story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people love to talk about their passions.
Right, it's like you're saying, tell me something that lights you up.
And when you approach small talk with that kind of genuine curiosity, it creates a completely different energy.
I bet. So we've talked about authenticity. We've talked about finding those connection points.
Mm.
What else does the source say about mastering the art of small talk?
Well, they have one final piece of advice that I think is crucial.
Okay, hit me with it.
Practice.
Practice, practice, practice.
Right, because it's a skill, not just something you're born with. It's
Exactly.
like you're not going to become a concert pianist overnight.
Right, you got to put in the hours.
Yeah.
So how do we practice small talk? Do we, like, stand in front of the mirror and rehearse our opening lines?
Well, you could if you want,
Okay.
but the source suggests making small talk a daily habit.
Oh, okay.
Like challenge yourself to have at least one brief conversation with someone new every day.
So it could be like the barista at your coffee shop.
Yep.
Or the person checking you out at the grocery store.
Exactly.
Or even just a colleague you haven't really chatted with before.
It's all about taking those small opportunities.
Right, those little interactions.
And using them to kind of flex your small talk muscles.
So it's not about becoming a smooth talker overnight.
Nope.
It's about building that muscle memory.
And the more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for navigating the world of small talk.
Me too.
And the best part is, it's not just about avoiding those awkward silences.
Right.
It's about making those genuine connections.
Exactly. It's about building relationships, even if they're just fleeting moments.
So listener, if you're ready to unlock the power of small talk, take those everyday interactions and turn them into opportunities to connect.
Challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone.
And remember, even if those first few attempts feel a little clunky, that's okay.
Everyone starts somewhere.
The important thing is to keep practicing, keep experimenting, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Because you never know where a little small talk might lead you.
That's right. It could be a new friendship, a business opportunity, or even just a brighter day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the surprisingly fascinating world of small talk.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep those conversations flowing.